Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast today from New York, I think right now, although she travels between New York and Paris, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, who is a master coach, a transformative leader, and the creator of the Unmessable philosophy. Josselyne has spent over 30 years empowering people to live the life of their dreams now, not someday, and helping them develop the resilience to stay focused on their vision no matter what life may throw at them. So welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, Josselyne. It's a great
Thanks
privilege to
so
have you here
much.
as my guest.
It's wonderful to be with you.
Excellent. Now, I'm really looking forward to diving into our conversation today. Your journey, and you've got a bit of a history of pop stardom, and the
Yes.
journey to becoming a transformative coach is a really unique blend of creativity and purpose. I'm eager to explore how your experiences have shaped your mission and empower others to live their dreams now, not someday. So let's start by hearing more about what fuels your passion and the impact you aim to make in the world today.
Well, when I got my record deal, it was definitely outside of what I thought was possible because when I was little, I wanted to be a singer. But when I was about 5 years old, I asked my father why he wasn't painting as he used to paint a lot. And then I noticed he was painting less. I said, well, how come you don't paint anymore? And he said, well, you can't do your art as your career. And in that moment, at 5, and it wasn't so much that he said it, but I said it to
Mm.
myself, like that was the truth. So I no longer even dreamed about it. I was like, okay, I guess you can't do that. So I'll be a business person or a lawyer or something, right? And when I was in my very early 20s, I was participating in a transformative workshop, and something was said from the front of the room. I don't even remember what it was, but I had this epiphany, like, maybe that's not the truth, that you can't do your art as your career. This thing that I've been living like it's the truth, like solid in stone, sort of got malleable to me. And it occurred for me not as the truth, but as a belief that I had held for 15 years. And I stopped believing it. And within 3 months, I got a record deal. And that record went to #1 and knocked Whitney Houston out of the #1 spot. She had been in the
Wow.
#1 spot for 14 weeks with I Will Always Love You. We were the next #1, and it was a dream come true. So, having that happen so easily, and I say easily because it really was like very flowing once I got rid of that limiting belief. I said, everybody could fulfill their dreams if they just were able to discover their blind spots and free themselves from whatever's messing with them. And a lot of what messes with us are things like limiting beliefs or shoulds or, things that we think are real that aren't real. And I became very committed to empowering people to have their dreams come true. And as a parallel pathway at that time, I was training to lead transformative programs because I had been involved in transformation since I was 11, believe it or not. That's like 40 million years ago, 47 years this year. So I had grown up in that methodology, and I, was not even, I think I was 20 and started training to lead and coach people in transformative methodologies. So it was sort of a parallel pathway of being a pop star and a transformative coach. And, the rest is sort of history, I guess.
Yeah, fascinating. And is your father painting again?
He is, and he's 91 years old, and
Oh,
we
wow.
just built an art studio for him as an extension to his house a couple of years ago, so he could paint large format paintings. Yeah, I usually have his painting behind me, but I just got this neon sign that says "Be Unmessable with," so I figured I should have that behind me when I'm doing podcasts and things. But honestly, usually I have one of his paintings. He's remarkable, though. He's very prolific. He spent the whole day in the studio painting today.
Wonderful. So transformation close to home as well,
That's
apart
right,
from
that's
yourself.
right.
But yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so your entire brand, and I talked about this at the beginning, is built around this concept of being unmessable with, and you made a comment there of identifying the things that mess with us, and
Yeah.
obviously the transformation is how do you change your beliefs around those things. So first of all, can you share with us what this unmessable with concept means to you, the philosophy, and how can it transform someone's life if we embrace it?
Yeah, well, it isn't about being tough, because sometimes people hear that word and they think it's like, well, just don't feel your feelings and buckle down and,
Yeah.
make yourself get through something. And that's not what it is at all. It's about being able to stay in the space of your vision, kind of looking up and out, which is where magic happens, the space of creation, I call it, as opposed to being hooked or reactivated by things that make us, basically get into survival mode. So, there are shoulds and shouldn'ts and goods and bads and rights and wrongs, and all those things keep us in this world of reaction. And it's not that you're not going to react if you're unmessable with, it's that you're able to pivot and shift from the world of reaction to the world of creation faster and faster and faster. That's the muscle that I develop with people, is being able to recognize when you're in that world of reaction, hack it, and reroute your brain to that space of creation and vision.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating concept. It's a little bit like the idea in NLP they teach you about being at cause rather than being at effect, which seems to be the kind of the two parallels for what you've
Yeah.
described. Yeah.
Well, cause in the matter, you're not to blame. That's not what being a cause in the matter is. It's being the author of how
Mm.
you view your life, because you don't always have a say over the circumstances, but you always have a say over how you interact with the circumstances. And a
Mm.
lot of that has to do with your view of the circumstances, or how the circumstances show up for you or occur for you. And that is shapeable by what you create. And that's what I use vision for. So I always start with people when I work with them on crafting a vision. Sometimes people call me a vision architect, because that's what I do with people. Because when I ask people, what's your vision? Mostly they give me goals, like, oh, I
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to, make a difference with 1 million people or something. I'm like, okay, that's a goal, but what's the vision? What's the context
Mm.
inside of which you're working on that goal? And that's where I begin with people.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I recall doing an exercise once very similar to what you described, where I had this goal and it was transformed into a vision and the process involved me writing the story and visualizing, okay, what's it look like when it after it's what's it look like as it's happening, when it's happened, and straight after it's happened. And I kind of wrote out, and it was creating the story because clearly this hadn't happened. But in my mind, this is how I pictured it. And just writing that out made it so powerful. It was sort of like very emotional for
Yeah, you can
me
get
to describe that,
grabbed.
and then having that front and center all the time, even at points where, because this vision involved pitching an idea to people, and clearly there were probably going to be some no's along the way, and holding on to that vision through all those no's, through that rejection, is can be very powerful.
And with the work that I do, I would call what you just said a goal. I would say that's not a vision,
Mm.
because ultimately that's something that's going to happen in reality or not happen, but it's measurable and it's something that would happen in the dual world. So I would ask you, if we were going to work together and I was going to get at your vision, I would say, okay, let's say all that happened. Now what's present, like an experience?
Mm.
That's more the realm of vision. It's experiential. It's a right now phenomenon. It's not a in 5 years this is going to
Mm.
happen, or in a year. It's a that's why I say, live your dreams now,
Yeah, yeah.
not someday, because ultimately all we have is right now, and the past and the future is an illusion, and we all know that, but we don't live like that.
Mm.
So, how do you embody your vision and create it as context for life versus content, which is what goals are? So,
Yeah.
how I demonstrate this with people, and I don't know, do people listen to this or just watch the podcast? Is it a mix?
It's a mix. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
mix. So, for those of you that can't see me, I'm holding up what you would say is a finger. So, I'd say in the context body part, what is this? And the answer is a finger. But if I shift the context and I still holding up the same thing, and I say in the context number, what is it? It's now a 1. And in the context direction, what is it? It's now up. So
Mm.
nothing in reality has altered the content, but the
Mm.
context alters everything. So the context is decisive. And I use vision like a context for life, like
Mhm.
a lens for you to
Mm.
see the circumstances and the people and yourself.
Mm. Yeah, and that you made a really important point there. I think that in some ways is a differentiator between goals and vision. In the goals is essentially something in the future, and one of the things I've often observed um, in speaking with people, particularly really high achievers, is that they achieve a goal that they set out to achieve, and then they get it's like climbing Mount Everest, right? You get to the
Yes.
top, you admire the sunrise that you got to see, and then okay, you've got the treacherous descent, which is a story
The
in and
next
of
goal.
itself. But
Yeah. Yes.
yeah, but after that, it's kind of like, okay, I've done that. Now what? Whereas
And that's
the
why I think
vision,
people are not fulfilled.
mm,
Really, I think that's a lot of the source of the lack of fulfillment in people's lives is because they're chasing goals.
mm, yeah. So talk to us about this idea of living your dreams now rather than waiting for someday, because a lot of you hear a lot of comments about people saying, well, once my business turns a profit, I'm going to do this, or once I have a lot of money, I'll live in a big house or take great holidays, travel, whatever it might be. And you think, well, why don't you just do it now and figure out
Yeah.
how to pay
Well,
for it if it's money? Yeah,
it's one of those limiting beliefs. We believe there's a someday. I mean, we've
yeah,
never
yeah,
gotten there. We're
yeah.
always right now. We've never not been now, but we live like there's a someday, and we're gonna do this or that, like you say, someday, or have this or that someday. So when I work with people on vision, I have them distinguish, well, what is it that they really want? Because it isn't the cars and the house and the
Mhm,
money. I mean, that stuff is fine. I mean, I'm not saying don't go for those things. And I think goals are very important. I work very closely with goals and backwards planning. And, I empower people to fulfill their goals. But that's not real fulfillment. Fulfillment is about creation, creating a vision and having that be fulfillable at any moment. So it isn't circumstantially dependent. So if I were, like when I work with actors, because I have an entertainment company, and I'll say, well, what's your vision? They'll say, well, I want to win an Academy Award, which is a goal,
mm,
right? And I'll say, okay, so let's say that happened. Then what? Well, then I could, pick and choose my projects. Okay, so let's say that happened. Now what? What's your experience of life that isn't your experience of life now? And ultimately, it'll take like 5 or 6 questions, but ultimately we'll get to something like peace of mind or freedom or, impact, something like that. And that is fulfillable right now. You
mm,
don't need to win an Academy Award to produce the experience of freedom, not only for yourself, but for other people, or connection. You could create that at Starbucks. You could create that with your family. You could create that right now. You and I could create that. We are creating that right now. So I give people access to a right now methodology that impacts their experience of life right now, which also impacts their goals. Because if they can bring that experience to their goals rather than hope to get that experience from their goals, that's a whole game changer. That's like a whole different way of living. It's literally living like Merlin the magician backwards.
mm,
That's the story about Merlin, is that he lived forward from the future because he was fulfilling the future at every moment.
mm. Yeah, yeah, it's a fascinating metaphor. um, one of the things that occurred to me there as you were explaining that was a question that I often ask myself, and I think it's a very powerful question. It's kind of like, and I use it. Well, I I really value happiness as
Yeah.
one of my core values, and I guess that's in some ways a vision.
Yeah, it could
And
be.
I can, and like you said earlier, we can't choose what's going on around us. And I, I was having an interesting conversation this morning again with my bike riding buddies, and they're still harping on about the COVID pandemic and the extended lockdowns we had and how awful that was and so on. And I thought, well, first of all, it's a long time ago. It's
Yeah,
time to move on. But
talk about
but
living in the past, but okay.
but it reminded me of going through that experience, how different people saw that. Now, I was unhappy for a little while, and I was frustrated because I couldn't go out to meet the bike riding buddies. I was limited to a 5 kilometer radius from home. I was limited to a 1 hour exercise outside. And I thought, well, there's nothing I can do about that because somebody else makes the rules. And the
I
pandemic
mean,
is
you
there
could
when
defy the rules and then there's a consequence, but
that's
yes.
right. Yeah,
No.
that's clearly a choice I had, and some people
Yes.
did choose to do that. But I thought, well, I can still choose to be happy. I can go out and enjoy that 1 hour. And in fact, I can reframe this a little bit because when I went out for that 1 hour bike ride, there were very few cars on the roads. And so it was actually quite pleasant compared to now, particularly during the day when there's lots of cars about. So we can, even in, times like that were very sort of demanding of people, we can find the positive and say, well, what do I need to do to be happy, or what do I need to do to realize my vision?
Yeah, or what action can I take right now that would bring forth happiness in the space or in the relationship that I'm in right now or in the
Mm.
situation that I'm in? So it's not limited to you. It includes you, but it's not about you. Vision is outward, like if you think about it just from a directional perspective, you're not looking inward, you're looking
Yeah, yeah.
outward. So vision goes outward, but it includes you. It's a space. It's a spatial conversation. It's someplace you're coming from, you're standing in, and you're heading towards with your actions. So it's a very kind of holographic space.
That's fascinating. Well, you talk about focusing on the vision versus the vehicle. So first of all, you've defined vision, define vehicle for us. I'm guessing it's how you get there or how you
Well,
uh, how you travel. Yeah.
definitely it would be, your vision's kind of like, okay, if your vision is Paris, how are you going to get there? There's lots of different vehicles to get to Paris, right? But let's say in the context of business, or let's just say in your life, because when I work with entrepreneurs, we do their whole life, not just their business.
Mm.
So if their vision is, I'm just going to say fulfillment, let's say that's the vision, right? Freedom and fulfillment. Then they have lots of vehicles to be able to express that and bring that forth. One could be their business. One could be their family. One could be their well-being. Those are all vehicles to be able to manifest or presence your vision. So if I'm looking at a business perspective, isolated to business, there are many vehicles in the business. So for you, you have this podcast is a vehicle that you have. It's not your only vehicle, but you also work with people, right? So that's another vehicle. So there's different vehicles that people can use to manifest or express their vision. The problem with most people is they get focused on the vehicle, not the vision. So if, they were working on selling their book idea and then that fails, they're messed up because it's like, oh, what am I going to do? And I'll never be able to da-da-da-da. No. That was just a possible vehicle. There's lots of ways to express that vision. So, what are some other actions? What are some other vehicles? So it keeps the playing field larger than myopically focused on any particular vehicle, because people do get attached to the means of getting someplace rather than, well, where are we going? So don't worry about how we get there right now. Like, where are we going? And it may be a lot simpler than we overthink it into.
Well, one of the things that kind of brought up for me was there's a lot of people that are really successful in business and some of the other areas of their lives, let's say family relationships, for example, suffer. And
Yes.
so they're very clearly focused on one vehicle at the expense of another.
I coach a lot of those people.
All right. So is that a lack of staying focused on the vision?
Well, what it is is compartmentalizing your life. So you might have a vision for your business, but it doesn't extend to your entire life. And when you don't extend the context to everything, then you have like an either or kind of life where people come to me and I want a work-life balance. I'm like, first of all, that's not a real thing. Your life is your life. Your
Yeah.
work is part of your life. But if you have one overarching context, then you don't experience burnout. One of the biggest things that people deal with is overwhelm and burnout. And that is almost always a function of being disconnected from your vision. You're focused on the vehicle, like you said, you're working on your work, you're getting through this, you're producing results, you're successful, yet everything else is suffering or other things are suffering. It's because it's possible to have it all inside of a particular context, but not do it all. So inside of being a human doing instead of a human being, you are getting through stuff. And most entrepreneurs are really bad at delegating, because they just think they're the ones who have to do everything. So they end up burnt out. So one of the first things I do with people is create an overarching context and have actions for every area of their life that they want to nurture. Because if you're not watering the seeds, there's not going to be any flowers, so you got to water the whole garden, not just the patch of tomatoes, I know that analogy didn't really quite work. I probably won't use that again, but
Yeah, this idea of human doing versus human being is something that always fascinates me, and I'm sort of interested to hear you bring it up. And so, kind of talk to us a little bit about that, because some part of that I see also as somebody who might be very successful in one area, but they're not fulfilled even by that area, by the
yeah.
success in that area, because they're kind of they're running through a to-do list and ticking it off, but there's just no kind of connection there.
Well, that's somebody who's operating in the world of reaction. What I was talking about before about the world of reaction versus the world of creation. Most successful people are really good reactors, and they have to be because they have to deal with putting out fires and, people are coming at them with things. So their muscle is overdeveloped in reaction. That's very different than creation. When they first started their business, many of them were in that space of vision and creation, and it was magical. It was like they were failing, they were succeeding. It didn't matter. They didn't know what they were doing, but they were alive, and it was magical. And then at some point, and this is not just with business, this happens in relationships, after a few months, it's like, oh, magic and glee. And then at some point, it shifts over to the world of reaction, which is a world where you have to manage things and have them survive. So you're now working on your relationship or you're working on your business, and it becomes something that it lends itself to doing things, doing a lot of things. And the more you do, the more you produce. And then you get a little addicted to that dopamine hit of, producing results. There's no fulfillment. There's no magic. There's no aliveness in that world. It's all kind of getting through lifeness is what I call it. Like you're getting through life and you're producing results, but so what? Or now what? And that's what I do with people. I take them out of that world, no matter how successful they are. I don't care how successful they are. If they're not fulfilled, then what is success really? What, they have a lot of zeros in their bank account. Okay, that's nice. You can't take it with you and it's not going to buy you happiness. So now what? So we work on actually shifting back over to that space of vision so that they can begin to fulfill on what they're creating versus manage what they created. And that's a very different mode.
Yeah. And how do you manage the balance? Because there's still that, okay, I've created this is my baby. I still want to make sure that continues to thrive. Do I manage that, or do I just hand it off to somebody, or do I train somebody and hand it off to somebody else and then
I mean,
go out here
you can't train somebody to manage your, to now be your in your marriage, most likely. You're probably not going to delegate those things, but in your business, absolutely. If you don't want to be the bottleneck in your business, you must release to expand. And most CEOs, entrepreneurs are the clog in the pipe, and no matter how effective they are, it hinges on them. So if you're a CEO or if you're a founder and you can't take a vacation without everything stopping, then you have not designed your business in a way that really works and is just sustainable. So I always talk to my founders about designing themselves to be deleted. So what that has to do with is you create the vision, right? You create the vehicles, and then you really design a backwards plan like the Merlin principle would do. And you create milestones. Maybe it's a 5-year plan, maybe it's a 1-year plan. But if you take 1 year, even, you do milestones every quarter. So if what your goal is by the beginning of next year is to have X number of clients or X number of impact or whatever it is that you're doing in your business, then you backwards plan it to see what team is missing, because it's either going to be a structure or a system that's missing or a team that's missing to be able to fulfill on what you really want, not what you can accomplish, because anything you can accomplish on your own isn't really worth accomplishing. That's why people aren't satisfied.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
like the donkey chasing the carrot and never gets the carrot, That's us.
Mm.
That's us human beings. We're the
Yeah.
donkeys, and that's the nice way of saying what they are.
Yeah. 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 Another wonderful metaphor here.
I got
All right.
loads
Well,
of
yeah, I talked earlier about the pandemic and some of the things that came out of that for me. You've worked with lots of people in various fields, and I'm sure that there's been lots of opportunities, shall we say, for those people to cultivate resilience and build their resilience. So how do you work with people to build resilience and then stay resilient when things happen that are totally out of their control and perhaps totally unexpected as well?
which happens all the time. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. I did a whole webinar on resilience and the difference between that and being unmessable with. And I did it with a neuroscientist because I was really interested in this whole concept of resilience, but it didn't quite capture what I'm creating about being unmessable with. And we talked about it and we really, looked at what the differences are. And here's what it comes down to, basically. Resilience is about bouncing back. So if you think about it, it's still in the same world of reaction. Something happens and you don't go down for the count. You kind of bounce back to where you were before. That's very different from the work that I do with people. When I work with people, no matter what happens, you have a reaction, whatever. Good, you can have good reactions too that keep you stuck in the world of reactions. You have a result that you like and you're like, oh, that was great. Da da da. That's still the world of reaction. So what I do is I have people see the red flags of when they're in that world and intervene in the brain patterns, because what's happening in that world is you're in fight, flight, freeze, just kind of get through the day, get through the situation, get through the relationship, whatever it is, good, bad, or ugly. And so I have people actually do something physical to interrupt those brain patterns, to shift your thought pattern to the prefrontal cortex, which is where creative thought happens. If you don't shift your brain patterns, then you're going to end up bouncing back from something, but you're still in that state. Your nervous system is still in that state of reaction. So getting to neutral is like what resilience would be. Getting to neutral is only the first step for my work. So once you're at neutral, then it's what am I creating? Then it's looking up and out at your vision and creating a context for you to function inside of that's going to give you juice, because you create it and you're not stuck with anything you create, because you can just create newly in the next moment, because you're not stuck with anything except what you stick yourself with, like your friends with the pandemic. They've stuck themselves with the pandemic. I mean, it's not even happening anymore and they're still talking about it. And that's mostly what we do as human beings. We are either trying to get back to some silver box moment or get away from some situation that, bugged us. And it's all, not being here now. I mean, to sound kind of trite, but we are here now and we've never been anyplace else except in some narrative or some story about the past or the future. But in reality, this is it.
Yeah, that's right. one of the things you mentioned there was, recognizing those red flags and shifting the narrative. So give us a couple of tools or easy things that we can start practicing if we get to the point, and I mean, that first step is not necessarily easy either, but that first step of, okay, there's a red flag. I'm doing something. I'm reacting. I'm reacting in a way that
Yeah.
perhaps has me stuck. Um, what are one or two techniques you can suggest for shifting that mindset very quickly?
Well, the first thing is the red flags are always physical. Now that's not actually true. Let me take that back. There's two kinds of red flags. One is the physical red flag. So you actually have a physical symptom of being in the world of reaction. And each person has their own manifestation of that. So some people, they get tightness in their chest. Some people, their face gets red or hot. Some people, they get tense in their shoulders. I mean, there's all different symptoms or red flags for being in the world of reaction. Now, when I say to people, well, what messes with you? They'll say things like self-doubt or imposter syndrome. It's conceptual stuff, not
Yeah.
the red flag. So what I have them do is be on a hunt for the physical symptom, because that happens just before the explanation of it. So before imposter syndrome sets in, which is completely conceptual, it's not a real thing, your tight chest happens. Your tight chest is real. Imposter syndrome is a real concept, but it's not real, right? So I have people deal with reality. So what's happening in your body? The other kind of red flag is a linguistic red flag. So there's things you say either out loud or in your head to yourself when you're being messable with, things like, oh, why bother? Or, oh, this is so annoying, or whatever, people's red flags are.
How can I be so stupid?
Exactly. Or how can they be so stupid,
Oh,
right?
that.
So,
Yeah.
but more likely. So
Yes.
I have people identify those kind of familiar physical red flags and familiar linguistic red flags so that they can catch it. Because if you're in the middle of it and you haven't identified it beforehand, you're going to miss it. It's like a blind spot for us, and you're too far down the road by the time you realize that you can't even turn back. So if you can catch it just as you're beginning to go down the road of being messable with, you can hack it. You can do something physical to interrupt the pattern. So people come up with all sorts of hacks. I just like to keep things simple. So I just breathe in for 3 and breathe out for 6. That resets and gets me to neutral. Some people do, what if people come up with tapping? They tap, their legs or their arms, or they'll stretch, reach their arms up and stretch. Some people stand up if they're sitting down, or sit down. Something physical, though, that's going to intervene in the predictable physical future, so to speak. So it can't be something that you do all the time. It has to be something that you've designed that's deliberate and intentional, because that will trigger your brain to reroute. So once you're at neutral, it's kind of like being at a fork in the road. The left road is the messable with road, and it's smooth, and they have gas stations on that road and fast food, and it's like attractive. And then the right road is the unmessable with road, the road of vision and creation. And that is gnarly. It's got branches and trees in the road, and you've got to forge a path. So it's not as compelling as just the easy default way of, reacting. So once you get to neutral in the middle, you then go, okay, now what am I creating? And what I do with people is I have them pre-create their vision, so they have a place to go and they don't have to think about it in the heat of the moment. So when they find themselves being messed with, they catch one of those red flags, whether it's linguistic or physical. They do whatever their hack is. So let's say breathe in, breathe out for 6. Then they're in the middle. And then the question is, okay, what action is going to manifest freedom right now? What can I do right now to create connection? What can I actually take an action on, not next week, not someday, but right now, that is going to put me in the world of my vision? And that's kind of the recipe. I actually have, give to your audience. If you go to UnmessableWithGift.com, there's an instant reset process that I give people. It's free. And that basically is what I just said, but it'll give it to you in writing and have you have prompts so that you can practice it.
Excellent. Fantastic. We'll have that link along with all the others in the show notes, of course. So this is fabulous Josselyne. I'm really enjoying the conversation. I'm aware of the time, though, so I think a good point now, after having described that process, is to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round. It's the same 5 question I ask of every guest, and the idea is you'll give us some insightful, short, snappy answers that will inspire the listener to go and do something awesome today as a result,
Great.
and perhaps
Game on.
realize one aspect of their vision. So what's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Be curious. I think that's in shortage these days. Everybody
Yeah.
knows everything rather than actually being curious.
Yes, I agree that curiosity is sometimes in short supply, and as a person that has has always had natural curiosity, I'm really excited by all these artificial intelligence tools now, more than anything else, because I can ask it questions that I might be too embarrassed to ask somebody else, and then have conversations based on that questions, because sometimes the answers are hard to believe, and I say, "You really sure about that?" Or give me your citations, your references,
Yeah,
and
it's
so on.
not a
But yeah,
reliable source.
yeah,
You got
yeah.
to some of those.
But it is a nice vehicle, if you like, for my
Yeah,
curiosity, where I can play with that.
totally. And it saves so much time. I mean, I use it to create playbooks and training manuals. And, I'll take a transcript of a coaching call and I'll say, give me 5 ideas for newsletters out of this transcript. So it's still my voice, but it saves
Yeah, yeah.
me thinking,
Yeah, excellent. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Getting coaches. I mean, I have actually I have 4 coaches right
Really?
now. And I think that being in a coaching structure is the smartest thing that anybody can do if they really want to expand and develop themselves in any area. I mean, if you look at any champion, they have a coach,
Hmm.
So I want to be a
Yeah.
champion human being. So
Well,
I get
yeah,
coaches.
yeah. Well, it's interesting you said that you have 4 coaches, because and the idea of the sports champion. I mean, they usually have many coaches, so they might
Yeah.
have coaches for their game strategy. They might have coaches for um, an aspect of their game, so a very specific skill set. Um, Often they'll have a mindset coach, um,
Yeah.
and yeah, maybe 1 or 2 others. All right.
I think it's smart. I think
Hmm.
people, if anybody listening has not engaged with coaching, it's worth trying it out. It really is. I mean, obviously, you got to get the right coach, but
Hmm.
there's a lot of good coaches out there.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. What's a favorite resource you use most often?
Alan Watts, who's a philosopher, and I use his writings, his quotes to give me inspiration. I find his book, The Book. I don't know if you've read it, but
No, I
if you
haven't.
haven't, you must read the book. You will love
Yeah.
it. It is like an ontological porn as far as I'm concerned, If you want to talk about the study of being, this is definitely like he's quite an innovator and just beautifully in touch with the universe. So I
Hmm.
use him a lot.
Okay. All right. Well, I will add that to my reading list, and of course, we'll have a link to it in the show notes as well. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Keep notes and hold them to account. So ask them what happened with blah, blah, blah. Because here's the thing, when I work with somebody, I'm not like an accountability coach. I mean, you don't need to
Hmm.
pay me to do that. You can just have a friend do that, But what I do is if you said you were going to accomplish something by the next session and you haven't, that to me reveals something messed with you. So
Hmm.
if you produce the results, great. If you don't, it's still a win because we will unearth and start to dismantle whatever it is that got in the way of you fulfilling on what you created. So to me, it's all good news.
Hmm. Okay. Excellent. All right. And final question of the buzz round. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
I don't know why somebody would want to differentiate themselves. Sort of a construct, in reality, we look solid, but we're kind of all just molecules. How can we differentiate my molecules from yours? Uh, I don't know. I would think it would be more interesting to undifferentiate yourself.
In what way?
Get connected with everything because you are,
Yeah.
and that you're you and I'm me is all a function of language. Language cuts us all up into differentiated chunks, but in reality, we're all just one entity. I don't know. I mean, I'm not religious, but I'm not religious, but I'm not, it's not my thing. But if you think of yourself as energy and molecules, how can you say this is me and that's you? I don't know. It's just all a construct. So I'd want to undifferentiate myself to really experience self, like the capital S self, versus some self that got made up, like an identity.
Yeah,
that got a
well,
little woo-woo. I'm not a woo-woo person, but I think that got about as woo-woo as I've ever been. So
all right. I think the concept that we're all connected in some manner is one to kind of reflect on every now and then and keep in mind. And there's
Alan Watts. You got to read Alan Watts.
right.
You'll love
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, every now and then I have an experience where I think, oh, that's clearly everything's connected. Everybody's connected. And yesterday we were at the an open range zoo, and I was standing face to face with a lion at about this distance to my camera here.
Wow. Was there
Of
something in between you, though?
There was a double glass panel in between us. But in terms of like there was eye contact, and clearly like it saw me, I saw the lion was looking into its eyes, and I thought, well, that's just a moment of connection. Now, what was going on in his mind, I don't know. He was probably thinking, oh, that'd be a tasty lunch or whatever.
Yeah. Who knows? When you speak lion, you'll find out. But
Yeah. But yes, the idea that everything's connected, I think, is something to think about every now and then.
Yeah, it's like, if you look back to if you're everything and nothing at the same time, and so then how is there anything outside of you? But that is, again, as woo-woo as I can get.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Josselyne. This has been absolutely fantastic, the conversation. Really enjoyed it. Now, where can people find out more about you and the work you do, and maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Well, they can definitely go to my website, unmessablewith.com, and I'm UnmessableWith on Instagram. Every place. You can just Google UnmessableWith, I'll come up. And if you want that free gift, I have lots of free gifts on my website on the freebies page. I have lots of things. If whatever you're dealing with, whatever messes with you, whether it's money or imposter syndrome or burnout, I have something for everything. Because I'm really committed that people get access to these tools. That's why I developed this system, because I believe that people can live their dreams and they don't have to wait till they have X number of dollars or, they retire or whatever it is, that they can actually do it now. And I want people deserve to have that kind of life. So go to unmessablewith.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, I was going to ask the question, what action you'd like our listener to take from today's conversation. So that sounded like an action, but is there anything you want to add?
Well, I would say start to inquire into your vision as opposed to your goals. So like, everything you've got that's a goal, say, okay, what would the experience of life be if that got accomplished? And start to toy with this world of vision. It'll shift how you relate to yourself, to others, and to life just in having the inquiry.
That's a really good way to approach it. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Josselyne. I've really enjoyed hearing your insights and having this conversation with you. So all the best for the future, and please do stay in touch.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me.